Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's service of the Lakeshore Unitarian Universal Fellowship. What a beautiful day. I'm looking out. We happen to have a creek behind us and there are lovely trees, not too much snow, but it's a beautiful day. And I hope you'll be able to get out and enjoy the weather, maybe wash your car if you want, but enjoy this one day because I guess it's going to be cold for the rest of the week. But anyway, so glad that you took time to be here. I think, as we all know, this has been a very hard week for all of us as individuals and as a community, as we experience heavy hearts over the loss of our dear and beloved friend, Cecilia. But I'm also filled with joy that she was able to spend the last week or so of her life in her home, surrounded by some flowers, lots of friends, and particularly by her two sons and their wives who were with her 24/7 for the last week of her life. It was just really endearing to see them taking care of her. She will be celebrated by us and I'm sure by the entire community as soon as health conditions are such that we can all gather together. We hope to open our church for in-person services, but I'm sure that the fellowship during her service will be filled with her many friends from the League of Women Voters, from social services, certainly from our fellowship. And as we plan ahead for that, I'd like to suggest that we think about the possibility that each one of us would bring a bouquet of flowers to the fellowship. And we could completely just surround the fellowship with flowers as if she were in our midst. And at a later date, we will certainly memorialize the garden in some way, because if it weren't for Seal, the garden would not be what it was. So anyway, we're glad to be here. It's a good day for all of us, and thank you for coming. The theme for this month is widening the circle. And if you've had a chance to read on the order of service a little bit about Poor People's Campaign, you will see that today's service fits in with this widening circle. And we're really delighted to welcome both Femi and Natalia to speak with us today. As was mentioned in the chat, Femi spoke at the Martin Luther King celebration earlier in January. And as a result of that, Bev Rawlings said, this is someone that we have to invite to come to our fellowship. So we're just delighted to have both of you here to share with us. Many of you may not have had a chance to read the paper today, but there was this section in the Herald Times. And it has to do obviously with Black History Month and many of the things where we've made progress, and in some cases not so much progress, relative to widening the circle to inclusiveness. In thinking about the principles of the UU, and then thinking about today's service and inclusiveness and reaching out to others, just want to remind all of us that almost every one of our principles has to do with this: the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience, and the use of the democratic process within our congregation, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. And then the last one is the respect for the interdependent web of all existence. And then the eighth principle, which is in the making right now, which has to do with inclusiveness. So I think that this service will certainly fit in with the widening the circle, and it is an integral part of the kinds of things that we think about as a fellowship. Again, I want to thank Femi and Natalia for being with us, because it's a special treat for us. They will kind of introduce themselves, but both of them have been working with the Poor People's Campaign for about 3 or 4 years. And it's just wonderful to see the young people who have dedicated their lives, at least at this point, to caring about other people and to furthering justice for all. With that in mind, do we have any announcements that we would like to make? Kathy Berger?
Yes, I have a couple announcements. Just following up on what you have been talking about, and maybe Erica can add to this part, is we are collecting things for the homeless. It's through a group in this part of the state, and anything that is contributed will stay in this community to help the homeless in this community between Hope House, the Haven, several other institutions. So there's Erica, you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I just wanted to make mention of the things that you can donate. We have a box in the foyer, and if anybody wants to bring anything for the box, just give me a call and I'll run over and meet you. Cleaning supplies, feminine needs, bathroom tissue, diapers, baby care, hair care, deodorant, dental care, body lotion, laundry soap, kitchen trash bags, paper towels, and face or bath soap. So those are the things they're looking for. And just please feel free to give me a call and I'll meet you there whenever. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica, for taking that on. The next thing I wanted to, yeah?
One caveat is I dropped my phone in the water, and so you'll have to use the house phone to get hold of me for the next 2 days until I have a new phone.
You want to put that in the chat? That number in the chat?
Yes,
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, the next thing is this afternoon, I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but the First Presbyterian, the cooperative ministry has received approval for an emergency warming shelter. And they will be meeting this afternoon at 1 over at First Presbyterian. You're interested in how that will go about, how that will be done, and what we might, as Unitarian Universalists, offer as far as assistance with this program. You could go over to the First Presbyterian Church at 1 o'clock today and hear what they're up to and what their plans are, and see if there's some way we can intersect with them. And the third thing is the board approved opening up the fellowship to in-person meetings starting in March. So it's under the same kind of rules we had originally, 6 feet apart and wear a mask and don't come if you're sick. But just so you know, we'll be opening the church or the fellowship up as of, I think the first meeting is May 6th or March 5th. March 5th. That's it.
Any other announcements? I have one announcement. As many of you know, we had an election on Tuesday for the school board, and there will be a general election on March 5th. If any of you are interested in participating in obviously we want you to vote, but if you would like to participate at all in furthering the campaign for some of the candidates, would like to donate some money, or would you like to donate some time, write postcards or whatever, you can contact me and I will direct you toward how you can help. This is an important campaign for us. Later in the service, if we have time, I'd like to read to you my niece, who's 7 years old and who is biracial. Her mother is half Japanese and half Caucasian, and her father is parents are from Nigeria and from Venezuela, goes to a school in Pennsylvania. And they showed much of what I think Femi and Natalia will show us, and discussed it. These were 7-year-old kids in 2nd grade. And it's just wonderful, the approach that the teacher used. So I think that we all need to be totally invested in our school system. So if you would like to participate in supporting it, please let me know and I'll direct you accordingly. Any other announcements? Okay, thank you. All right, we will light our chalice. We light this chalice as a symbol of our commitment to our fellowship and to each other. May our many sparks meet and merge in communion of heart and soul.
Love is a doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to share strength in fellowship. Thus do we covenant.
And our opening words, Spirit, help us to understand that we each have a role in justice work, for our liberations are tied to one another. Help us to find our way and commit to it. Help us to give all to this and hold nothing back, for precious lives depend on it. May we summon the courage to tear down this system of injustice and get busy creating a world community with justice for all. Our opening hymn is
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. We are not afraid today. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid today. Oh, deep in my heart, I know that I do believe that we shall overcome someday. Yet no budenda, yet no budenda, yet no budenda, yet no budenda, Yavim, oh, Yavim, the Father, yellow budenda, Yavim. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I know that I do believe that we shall overcome someday. Thank you, President Havel.
Thank you very much.
We shall overcome. Thank you, Monkey Business. Thank you, President Havel.
Czołgaj pan Wacław Havel.
Our reading for today is entitled Empathy. Empathy isn't just something that happens to us, a meteor shower of synapses firing across the brain. It's also a choice we make to pay attention, to extend ourselves. It's made of accession, that dowager cousin of impulse. Sometimes we care for one another because we know we should, or because it's asked for. But this doesn't make our caring hollow. The act of choosing simply means we're committed ourselves to a set of behaviors greater than the sum of individual inclinations. This confession of effort chafes against the notion that empathy should always rise unbidden, that the genuine means the same thing as unwilled, that intentionality is the enemy of love. But I believe in intention, and I believe in work. I believe in waking up in the middle of the night and packing our bags and leaving our worst selves for our better ones. Leslie Jameson. Certainly, the individuals who will speak to us today, Femi and Natalia, are individuals who think about others, whose main concern is not about themselves, not being corporate executives, not rising in the corporate world, but in caring about other people. And we are just privileged to have them here today to share some of their concern, some of their work, and who they are as people. They will speak to us today on the national call for moral revival. And they are both a part of the Wisconsin Poor People's Campaign. So Femi and Natalia, please join us and share with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you everybody for having us here today. Particularly, thank you, Kathy and Jim, for the invitation. My name is Natalia. I am in Milwaukee. I've been here for about 3 years, and I've been with the campaign for about 3 years in different capacities. Right now, I help coordinate the Milwaukee Poor People's Campaign group along with Femi, and also very involved in some of the planning of events that we have invitations for you today.
Yes, as Natalia said, definitely great to be with you all today. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Jim. Good to see familiar faces like Bev and many others here. Also, want to recognize the loss of Cecilia and recognize that I mourn with you guys, and recognizing that loss to your community and to your fellowship. I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri. My parents are from Nigeria. So good to hear Kathy and seeing some type of connection of her grandchild or niece from Nigeria. That's very interesting and very awesome to hear about. I've been in the Milwaukee area for 2 years now. In 2019, I moved here. Specifically to start up a church. So my background is faith. My background is a pastor. At the same time, this is completely volunteer for me and Natalia, volunteer roles. This is what we love to do and be a part of, and seeing life come about through Wisconsin and throughout the nation. And so great to be here with you all.
So before we get officially started with our presentation about the campaign and what we do and those invitations we have for you all, just like in-person services, there's a lot of music in our movement. And while following Joan Baez's voices, it's kind of a courage for me to try to sing. I do hope the reaction from the audience is a little bit more lively than in the video. Folks seem to just be like, we shall, and we can't overcome just like this. We gotta overcome in excitement and liveliness. So I will share with you 2 of my favorite songs that we sing at the Poor People's Campaign. And I hope that with my very out of tone voice, you are inspired to sing on your own, regardless of who you're with, because singing is moving. Singing in community helps us build collectivity and remind us that we're not alone and that our voices together are way more powerful than alone. So here goes the first song I really like, and it goes like this. We are a new, unsettling force, and we are powerful, new. unsettling force, and we're here, a new unsettling force for liberation, and we got nothing to lose but our chains, and we got nothing to lose but our chains. That's one, and thanks, Jennifer, for singing along. That's awesome. And then the theme of widening the circle. One way that we widen the circle of the Poor People's Campaign is by building unity across languages. So we also sing in Spanish, and here goes one of our favorite songs in Spanish. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza, la libertad es mi única bandera. Rise up, my people, my condors, my eagles. No human being is ever illegal. All right. So with that, let us get started on the presentation. Give me 1 second as I get ready to share. Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, I wanted to share with you a little bit of a teaser of demonstration of one of the big things that everybody at the campaign is gearing up for.
We welcome you to the launch of the Mass Poor People's Low Wage Assembly and Moral March on Washington, D.C., June 18, 2022.
We are a new unsettling force, and we are powerful. New unsettling force, and we are here.
We're rising up to demonstrate the compelling power that we, poor and low-income people, have to reconstruct society from the bottom up.
And we need to do it with the loudest voices possible, the biggest actions possible.
Because we know that there is no scarcity in this land. The only scarcity is the moral will to do what's right.
Hold on, just a little while longer.
We are those with sub-minimum wage jobs who can't afford sky-high rent.
People with disabilities are the fastest growing minority group.
It's crazy to me that in 2021, it's still legal for workplaces to pay a sub-minimum wage to people with disabilities.
There are still so much trial and tribulations that we go through as Indigenous people. We can't get a decent wage to sustain ourselves, nor can we get adequate housing.
Veterans across this nation say enough is enough. We can't pat essential workers on the back on one day and then cut their health care the next day.
Health is a political choice.
What more do I need to do to prove that my voice is just as valuable as anyone else's?
There are still forces in denial that would try to slow walk our transition to a clean economy and a just future for us all.
We have an immoral system run by immoral people.
But together we walk and we fight.
It's time for a change. Reconstruyamos esta gran nación.
See, we are people of resilience as we fight these interlocking injustices together.
When we work together, mobilize together, and rise together, we become a voice for the voiceless, and we become an agent of change in a time where great change is needed.
We need the Third Reconstruction to ensure that deaf people, people with disabilities, and all people can have the right to live and to thrive.
We know what they are doing, but the question is, what are we going to do? Reconstruction begins when we change our mentality and say it's time for you to get your foot off of my neck.
Justice is coming
Hey! Do you believe that of today?
Well, yeah, definitely. As you can tell, the Purpose Campaign on a national level seeks to widen the circle very wide, that no one is left out. Those with disabilities of all cultures, backgrounds, etc. Poor, rich, middle class, whatever the case may be. Like the inclusion is very serious within the Purpose Campaign. And I love your guys' theme, widening the circle. And what does that mean? And how do we do that? Well, I hope this time together shows what that means for us and what that means for Wisconsin and what that means for this nation as we go forward together. Natalia, if you could go to the next slide. And we also welcome the chat to be very lively. So if you got things to put in the chat, definitely put it in the chat. We love to see us talking together as we present in these times. But you know, Galatians 6:9 talks about, let us not become weary in doing good. For the proper time, we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. And what we see is two pictures. The right is Reverend Groppe, someone of Wisconsin. And what we see is Coretta Scott King and Reverend Ralph Abernathy in Resurrection City. And so we will see history being played out, and as it mingles together, as the nation intersects with Wisconsin, and as Wisconsin intersects with this nation, we will see that. Next slide, please. And so what is Poor People's Campaign's history? November 1967, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the staff of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference would meet for their retreat. And it was a meeting to rest, but also to strategize for the continued work for the poor. And there was a strong recognition that many minorities and all numbers of the poor would never have full citizenship until there was an economic security. Thus, we see the introduction to the Poor People's Campaign. And really, it's suggested by a woman named Marianne Wright, known today as Marianne Wright Edelman, who was and is a strong voice for children and families, a graduate of Yale Law School. And the demands of that time is what we see is a demand for better jobs, unemployment insurance, guaranteed annual income, and an education for adults and children. Now, these are daring demands. These are not shy demands. These are demands that seek to bring permanent security for us all, that no one left out. And so this is, in short, is a revolution of values. And so success is not straight. It's not a straight shot to DC. It takes twists and turns along the way to get to justice. It takes scattering the seeds of truth and love. And specifically what we see is in Memphis, Tennessee, there were sanitation workers who are fighting to be recognized as human beings deserving of better pay and work conditions. And the staff of SCLC advised Dr. King, do not go to that meeting. There is too much stuff that needed to be done in preparation for DC. We just have too much stuff going on. And we all know that Dr. King's nature is not one to bypass injustice, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so King had to go. It's very in similar line with your liturgy of empathy and how the Spirit is calling to move us forward into action together. And so Dr. King had to go to Memphis. And what we see is King losing his life. King's push into the direction of human rights would be shot down by system and structures that ultimately are against you and me. And so what we see is Dr. King standing with sanitation workers who are basically saying that I am a man. I am deserving of rights. I have value. I have citizenship. And that didn't end the movement. The campaign continues and launches on Mother's Day, May 12th of 1968, opening with Coretta Scott King saying in her speech, "Our Congress passes laws which subsidize corporation farms, oil companies, airlines, and houses for suburbia. But when it turns its attention toward the poor, it suddenly becomes concerned about balancing the budget." And this is what we continue to see throughout our history, right? This concern of balancing the budget when it comes to the poor, but throwing a lot of money at systems and structures that don't bring actual change. And so Resurrection City happens, and ultimately it's shut down June 24th, 1968, not being able to get an extension of a permit, and so being forced to close. Next slide. And so we see in this slide right here of our history, summer of 2018, that the Poor People's Campaign relaunches and re-energizes itself, that justice cannot be held down. Justice has to continue to move forward. And so in 2018, we see this happening. June 29th, it launching over all parts of America, where many people are arrested in their state capitals. I was arrested. Probably Natalia was arrested wherever she was at the time. We were all being arrested, demanding that the poor be heard, that situations that affect us all be looked at. And so we see the campaign continuing further into what we see now today. Next slide. And so why do we rise? One, we rise to demand that the 140 million poor and low income people in our nation, from every race, creed, color, sexuality, and place, are no longer ignored, dismissed, or pushed to the margins of our political and social agenda. Would someone else like to read this slide right here? We rise to number 2. Would anyone like to volunteer to read this slide for us?
We rise not as left or right, Democrat or Republican, but as a moral fusion movement to build power, build moral activism, build voter participation, and we won't be silent anymore.
Thank you, Kathy. 3, we rise to change the moral narrative and demand that the interlocking injustices of systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, militarism, and the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism all be ended.
Thank you, Femi. Would somebody like to read this slide?
We rise to challenge the lie of scarcity in the midst of abundance.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I want to just make a very brief pause here, because I think as with the powerful words that Femi and the history that Femi has shared, and the theme that we're sharing here today of widening the circle, I want to challenge us to rethink what widening the circle means, right? Because what I see of widening the circle is inviting people to an existing circle that, as Dr. Martin Luther King taught us, and as the campaign has shown, is a circle that is not working for everybody. So maybe one way that we actually widen the circle is by reforming the circle, changing the circle, right? When we widen a circle, it's changing the way that it exists. And so the widening perhaps is not just allowing more people into a circle and a system that's broken and that it's not working for all of us, not just those that we want to bring, but that we know that in ourselves, it doesn't work for us either. In the fact that we have so much abundance that is going to the top and that we barely see the crumbs means that the circle itself is not working for us. So I challenge us to think about, how do we revision the circle? How do we restructure the circle so that then it's a circle that, when we all fit in, actually meets the fundamental needs of all of us. And then lastly, would somebody like to read this 5th, Why We Rise, please?
We rise to lift the voices and faces of poor and low-income Americans and their moral allies with a new vision of love, justice, and truth for America that says poverty can be abolished and change can come.
That's right. Thank you. And so really, we will overcome. We shall, and we shall overcome. We will rise. And we are rising. So what does all of that mean for us here in Wisconsin? So we have a general idea, both of the history of the campaign and the demands and the why we have come together in a space like this. Now, what does that mean for us here in Wisconsin? The slide number 3 that Femi read talked about the 5 interlocking injustices. And Femi could probably more eloquently and accurately say this, but what I understand is that the initial idea of the interlocking injustices came from Dr. Martin Luther King and the original campaign, realizing that militarism, racism, and poverty were, were intrinsically related, and that you can't address one without addressing the other. And with the campaign, the updating, let's say, or the revivaling of the campaign in 2018, we have added these other 2 very intrinsical injustices that are the ecological devastation, or as it says here, pollution, and then the distorted moral narrative. So we'll get to see each of them together, but in the same way that we showed that the campaign didn't just magically come out of nowhere, that it has a rich history. That started in the late 60s, and even though it got relaunched in 2018, it doesn't mean that there was nothing happening for 50 years. It actually means that people came back in their communities, even if the first time the Poor People's Campaign, through the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King and other ways of attack, had to not exist as one. People went back to their communities and organizations, such as the National Union of the Homeless and other spaces, Welfare Rights Union, etc., to continue to build the values and the campaigns and the advances that the campaign now carries. Okay. So the first interlocking injustice that the campaign tackles is systemic racism. I'm sure a lot of what we're going to talk about here is known to you all, and as it was brought in the concerns and joy section of the service, voter suppression continues to occur. So here in Wisconsin, particularly, gerrymandering and panning with the electoral vote and the construction of maps to ensure that the status quo continues and the voice of those unheard continues to be silenced by those people who are in power. It's an ongoing problem that's actually getting worse with everything else that's happening nationally. Particularly with voter suppression, the latest move that we see is that the state Supreme Court decides that we have to remove the drop of boxes for voting, for mail-in voting, not mail, but drop of boxes for voting for April. And we know that that's being challenged. And we understand that sometimes it becomes this legal battle that only involves certain people kind of far from us. But we realize that deeply what it means is that the poor and dispossessed can't vote. And within the poor and dispossessed, generally Black and brown folks are more affected, as we know. But we know that this is not just a matter of helping others, that when the vote is suppressed for one, that means that the vote is suppressed for all of us. So when I do think about the why I do this work, I can't deny that there is obviously a caring for others in here. But I want us all to think about, as we participate in the Poor People's Campaign, and for those of you who want to join us, and for those of you who do fellowship through your space through the Unitarian Universalist, think about why it also matters to you and your own well-being to do this work. Why it's important to care about others in the sense that it also brings benefit to you. So in my personal experience, all the work that I've done throughout my work in community service and organizing has always made me realize that it's not so altruist in the end. When I vote against voter suppression, it's because I want for once for my vote to count. When I fight about healthcare for all, it's like, I really want to stop paying this unending bills and understand for once my policy that I know that everybody in this country has gone through, pretty much everybody. Only the very top probably has never had to worry about. But when healthcare is tied to a job, and when we have wild co-pays, etc., and when the care is poor, is not good, and then it's all privatized, it's something that it affects us all. So related to systemic racism, as far as the healthcare crisis, we know that there's these racial inequalities that are very much ingrained in a system that is failing all of us as poor people, not just Black and brown folks. As we go through these 5 interlocking injustices, I invite folks to put in the chat, how you have seen those in systems manifest in your communities, in your experiences, in your life, in your fellowship. So that is for systemic racism. The second interlocked injustice that the Poor People Campaign addresses is systemic poverty and inequality. And here are just some of the 3 most recent examples of how that poverty manifests itself in Wisconsin. The first 2 very much related to the pandemic. So after the eviction moratorium was dropped in Milwaukee, the very first day that the courts opened for that, Berata Properties, one of the biggest slum landlords in Milwaukee, flooded the system with eviction notices that, even in a practical level, the clerks and everybody in the courts was like, this is ridiculous. But then what does that speak of the humanity of the people that, lost their jobs, haven't been able to find stable work, that to begin with, the system was failing us before the pandemic. We were still fighting under substandard jobs and wages and conditions. On top of that, we get the pandemic, and as soon as, quote unquote, things are going back to normal, you have to choose between where you're going to live and how you're going to feed your children. Second, we see a study that was done about how the wealth of Wisconsin's richest people grew during the pandemic. And then third is, how we see that tons and tons of food continues to get wasted in a space that, where people go hungry at night. I'm gonna start kind of summarizing a little bit in the interest of space and to have enough time for discussion. Third is ecological devastation. And again, I invite folks to write how that's being felt in your communities, in your own experiences, or elsewhere. But here in Wisconsin, 2 specific examples of ecological devastation is in Wausau, north central Wisconsin. Wells just tested positive for what's called forever chemicals that are being linked through study to various health conditions. And government is not doing anything. And even the lobby, the Chamber of Commerce of Wisconsin, is suing the Department of Natural Resources to stop testing. And then on top of all of that, the largest polluting 3M plant in the nation sits right in Wausau. And then as we see also, it was found that Wisconsin is the #1 state with the most people living near toxic release facilities. So we can share the link to where that latest study came from, because that's when the numbers start getting a little funky. Regardless, too many people are living close to places where corporations pollute freely. Femi?
And how we see this continue is the war economy and militarism. Dr. King said, our economy must become more person-centered than property and profit-centered. Our government must depend more on its moral power than on its military power. And we must ask ourselves, Manitowoc, that a government that spends $778 billion, one of the biggest in some of these past years, and advocated for an increase to that, which got it to that limit. But when there is things that affect us as people, our elders, our elderly people who are food insecure, who need better treatment related to elder care, our children, everyone in between, when we need things that address those issues, it's shot down. We have to ask ourselves why. Wisconsin deals with 2 million people living in poverty. And of that 2 million plus people, 1.4 million are white. I mean, do we know the factual evidence of how these disparities actually affect us in our communities, in our state? We see the fire jets of the F-35s and how that campaign has been pushed back here in Wisconsin, as it is flying over many people's neighborhoods and communities. And it's so loud that it's bothering people's homes, that it's shaking literally people's homes. And that is a recent advocacy point around this state. And why is it that fighter jets, F-16s, are retired better than you and me? That these instruments of war can retire better than us? We must ask ourselves these questions. 5, distorted moral narratives. We see that hate widens the circle of division. Love widens the circle of our shared humanity. Hate pushes people out. Love includes our vulnerable neighbors in America, from Afghanistan, around the world, like Latin America and many other spaces. Hate makes sure the 2 million poor of Wisconsin, who 1.4 million of those are white, remain poor. We must do more. And when we think about this, Dr. King died for the garbage workers. And who are the garbage workers in our state? Who are they? What do they look like? When I think about Manitowoc, who are they? A recent study pointed to the poverty issues within Manitowoc, called ALEC. And it showed that the majority of poor people live in Kellnersville Village. 45% are in poverty in Kellnersville Village. The second is Two River City. Many percentages live in poverty. We must ask these serious questions that are affecting every single one of us. Next slide.
Thank you, Femi. Today I've become a master at chat and muting and seeing people and the screen. I'm proud of myself. So thank you all for your patience. Lastly, just so how can we get involved, right? There are many ways that folks can participate. So I'll be very brief. This is a bilingual slide that we borrow from the past. So if you speak or understand or read Spanish, please check out the right column. And then on the left, we want to share a little bit about how the campaign is organized here. So we have a statewide coordinating committee, of which Femi and I are part of. And we also have an existing media and communications committee that deals with all of the messaging and communications for the campaign. And I'm going to share with you the groups that we have in case one of these appeals to you. In process of forming, we have an arts and culture committee that brings the music, the song, the artistic beauty to the campaign. A labor committee, right? And we have made alliances with different labor groups in the state. And a faith and moral outreach that perhaps particularly this congregation would be interested in joining, where we think about, from a faith perspective, how we get involved in the campaign. Currently, we have Rock, Marathon, Milwaukee, and Dane County groups, but perhaps if a Manitowoc County group for the PPC would want to start, let's talk about how to make that happen. And you can see some of the existing partner organizations like Vecinos Unidos here in the South Side, Fight for 15, Expo, which is former incarcerated folks, and more. And then some specific ways that folks could support and be part of what we do. Our next statewide meeting is March 8th at 7 p.m. It'll be virtual. And it will feature Reverend Liz Theo Harris. Second, you could join, sorry, I can't see, I can't move it, here we go. Like I said, join one of those committees that we mentioned in the past. Third, right now with that water situation that we shared in Wausau, we have a fundraiser going from it's organized by our North Central Marathon County group. And it really is in response to the lack of transparency, support, movement from both government and corporations in this case. People have not, as of today, been told how they will be supported with the fact that they can't drink their own tap water. So we'll have a fundraiser to bring filters and bottled water to those who need it the most. And to donate, the best way is to go to gofundme.com. And if you search for the words water and Wausau, you'll find it. And then lastly, please fill out our getting involved form. Femi, are you able to please drop it in the chat? I can't because I'm sharing, so I can't see the notes. But Femi will post the link to our Get Involved form. So that's one way where you could put out your contact information and let us know specifically what you want to join. Alternatively, here is our email address at the bottom. So you could also just send an email and say, hey, I'm interested in this, or I want more information. You know, I didn't get to catch everything that was said, but please call me back and we will. And that email address is Wisconsin, thank you, Wisconsin@poorpeoplescampaign.org.
So just drop that Get Involved form, and quickly telling you about More Tour. Reverend Barber and Reverend Theo Harris will be here March 28th. Please mark your calendars. We'll be in Madison, Wisconsin. It'll be huge. That's a Monday. And so we're gearing up to go towards DC, but we know we have to do some twists and turns along the way to rally the people. And then, yes, June 18th, 2022, we will be rallying to DC for that as well. There's gonna be a quick video at the end, and then we'll share some concluding thoughts real quick.
Yes, and that invitation to go to DC is not actually coming necessarily directly from Femi or I, you know. Oh, let me see if I can do this. Now this thing is freezing on me. Here we go. Here's who is actually inviting us all to go to DC.
Now, I want some of you all to go to Washington with us, even if you have to bring your whole family. We are going to have in Washington facilities, and we're going to have food, and we are going to demand that the government do something about these conditions. Now, we want you all to come on to Washington when you get out of school.
With the Poor People's Campaign, Martin is talking about taking these poor people to Washington, build tents, and live on the mall until this country did something about poverty. Said, you know, we can do better than this.
We assembled here together today with common problems.
He started to look at the option of bringing all poor and suffering people together. And it's like, you know, sort of, doggone it, let's take on the whole system. Let's deal with the systemic poverty.
Thank you very much. We are rushing to get over to Alabama, and we've enjoyed being in Mississippi today. Many people will go into Washington by foot. We're going to have a mule train also coming out of the South. In 1776, the nation signed a huge promissory note. In this campaign, we're coming to get our check.
King was in fact talking about redistribution of wealth. He was talking about passing money down and shaking the system up. The Poor People's March on Washington was going to shake the government to its core.
Can you imagine what will happen if all these black and white and brown people will go to Washington and build tents and live in tents in Washington? You're talking about a redistribution of the wealth of this country? Oh, no. No, no, no. You're talking about new tax laws? No, no. Don't let King get to Washington.
To conclude, if we are to widen the circle, friends, for all people, we must live a life that allows all people to enter the front door and not the back door. Dr. King's invitation is still offered to you and me, right? And so we are to join in the continued fight that stands for the many injustices anywhere and everywhere of our society, knowing that it threatens us all in this process. And so I hope to see you. I hope to see you at the More Tour. on March 28th. I hope to see you in June 18th in DC. I hope to see you soon, even, as we advocate for the homeless in Manitowoc and many other issues facing our society. And so with that, I'll pass it back to Kathy and open the space for questions as well.
Thank you both so much. This is really enlightening, and it makes me think, as I read the last sentence about waking up in the middle of the night and packing my bags. What will I take with me for myself, or what will I take with me for others? We have a few minutes for some questions, because it's just been a wonderful, eye-opening and very thought-provoking. Are there any among us that would like to ask some questions to Femi and Natalia?
This is Jim, and I have a comment to make. It dawned on me as I was listening to you. My financial advisory company just sent out a policy document on corporate responsibility in funding and in finance, basically. And they were, really talking about environmental stuff, and it's a well put together document. But I realized that the main piece missing is wealth distribution and lowering some of the profits and spreading that out, and how that really addresses the poverty issue. So I'm going to write my financial advisor and respond to this document, because this is a large investment firm, and I just might suggest other people who have investments might write their investment people, and because the Supreme Court has said that corporations are people too, so we got to get them in this. That's my comment.
Thank you, Jim. Other comments or questions? Jen.
In the campaign, is there sort of a digital arm? Because a lot of what you're doing is educating people and showing up. And showing up digitally is just as important these days as a protest, essentially. So is there a digital kind of component, a digital storytelling, so to say?
Take it, Femi, or should I take it? Okay. Thanks, Jen. So yes, two things. With the pandemic, we already had a digital presence, but with the pandemic, the campaign, just like many other spaces, had to realize what are meaningful ways to be involved online. And we're really proud that particularly for June 20 of 2020, we were planning a huge in-person march, like we're planning for this year. And we were able to successfully make that be online. I don't know if anybody here was able to participate, but the powerful testimony, music, speakers, as much as what we could feel, being together online was transferred in that way with interpretation into Spanish and ASL. So we have had that past of online interaction. And right now, as we monitor the current pandemic situation, we're trying to meet in person where we find that it's safe to do so. However, our statewide meetings continue and will probably for a while continue to be online, especially because it allows us to gather people in different regions in one space. So March 8th at 7 p.m., we hope to see you there. And then also telling stories, specifically, as you mentioned, we do have, We Won't Be Silent Anymore Stories project, which is a both virtual and what it is a map of Wisconsin, where when you click on a space, on a location, somebody from that place tells their story of how the 5 interlocking injustices are affecting them. And it's a beautiful way to see, listen, and geographically understand how we are all tied in this together. So once I stop, I'll be happy to share the link of the map, and then also invite you all, if you want to share a story, to please participate, and we can, if you write to us, we can help coordinate that.
Linda?
I read an article in the paper just this morning, maybe it was yesterday morning, talking about the Wisconsin legislature and how the Republicans are planning to increase all the possible complications they can for people to get unemployment and increase the requirements. And so if you would like to write to one of your representatives in the state, in Madison, that would be a really good thing, because it's pretty scary stuff.
Any other comments? And I think that Femi and Natalia have indicated that they would be willing to stay with us for a few minutes after the service during our chat and answer some more questions. And on behalf of all of us, I can't thank you enough for sharing with us. This is just wonderful. Bev was so enthusiastic after having heard Femi and now having heard Natalia. I hope that we can stay connected because you're doing wonderful work and we thank you for it. Our closing hymn is "We Laugh, We Cry." I'm not hearing any audio. Are others?
No.
Jim, can you check the audio?
Jim, I think you might have to reshare sound. So stop sharing, and then when you share, click on share computer sound. I don't know why they don't make that default at Zoom. It's always a problem.
Yeah.
We laugh, we cry, we live, we die, we dance, we sing our song. We need to feel their song, here to which we can belong. We need to feel the freedom just to have some time alone.
But most of all, we need those friends we can call our very own.
And we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found what we need to be together. We have our hearts to give, we have our thoughts to receive, and we believe that sharing is an answer. A child is born among us, and we feel a special glow. We see time's endless journey as we watch the baby grow. We thrill to hear imagination freely running wild.
We dedicate our minds and heart to the spirit of this child.
And we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found the time to be together. And with the grace of age, we share the wonder of youth, and we believe that growing
of what we find.
And we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found our joy being together, and in our search for peace, may we finally see even to question truly is an answer.
Thank you, Jim. Our closing words, "Do not be alone right now," by Reverend Karen Johnston. Do not be alone right now. Gather together. Gathering together grows courage in ourselves and in others who see the numbers swelling. It is a small thing, but right now it is an important thing. Great sources of wisdom remind us, just because you cannot stem the tide of all hate, it is still the right to do the thing you can do. These things add up. Your one thing and my one thing, his one thing and their one thing and her one thing. Together, it becomes a big thing. Do not be alone right now. Any liberation, all liberation is collective liberation. My freedom is bound with yours and yours with mine, inextricably. Let us together cast our lots doing this big thing, bending the moral arc of the universe toward justice. As we extinguish the chalice, let us join in Salome.
Stop share.
Thank you all so much for coming. And I want to remind you that next week we're having another wonderful speaker, Matthew Rothschild, who is very well known. He's the Democracy Now! Campaign and has spoken in Manitowoc on a number of occasions. I'm sure that Femi and Natalia know who he is, but it's just a wonderful opportunity for us to continue our discussion of widening the circles. He's the author of 12 Ways to Save Democracy in Wisconsin. So I think this will be something that'll be educational and very important for each and every one of us to hear. So please have a good week and join us next week. I think, Jim, we've lost some people, so maybe we can just have one chat room.
I think so. I agree with you. So if people want to just put themselves on gallery view and we can continue the discussion. I want to say I am just impressed with this presentation today. It's of all the presentations I've gone to, this one really mobilizes me. I really appreciate how you put your message together. It presents some really hard facts, and a lot of presentations I go to talk about how bad things are, but they don't focus on what we can do. And I've got a lot of great ideas from this. So thank you very much, Femi and Natalia.
I just want to share a personal story that kind of relates to what you said, Femi and Natalia. every year at Christmas time, I make out my Christmas list, get my cards, and then make my list of family and friends that I'm going to give gifts to. And each year, I give a little bit, not enough, and this year I'm going to give more to the people who collect my trash. So many things that I give money for are things that I could do myself, but I can't pick up my trash. I can recycle my cardboard and so on, but I can't pick up the trash that's in my big 50-gallon container. And it thrills my heart to see the look on their face when I give them a $20 bill or whatever. And it makes me want to say that next year is going to be more.
Well, thank you both, Jim and Kathy, for sharing. I think I can say I was gonna write to Femi offline that I feel it was also. I also feel that it was a really powerful presentation, and we feel very really lucky to be able to talk with you all about the work that we do, to invite you to participate in it, for us to think together, for us to hear the readings and thoughts, and the way that the service is conducted is also a big fortune to be able to learn from you all as well, and invite you to be part of this. So we wanted to really thank you for the invitation, and thanks, Kathy, also for thinking about those that do that quote unquote essential work, and how can we also, beyond those individual donations that are super important for people and many times are life or death, how do we help folks organize into having work with dignity conditions? How do we build a world where our children can go to school with their children? I mean, I don't have children, but that children can go to school in the same schools, that all of them have good resources, and people can have the best education possible, and that not be marked by your zip code or your race or things like that. So that's why I love the campaign, because we help kind of think about how do we rise beyond together.
Femi and Natalia, thank you from us also. I think the reality of those numbers of how many people are in poverty, 140 million out of the population of our country, and the unfairness of food scarcity when there is so much abundance and waste, that's heartbreaking. So again, thank you for bringing it to our awareness, and it'll cause us to be thinking, what can we do locally, and the poor are among us. We know that. So thank you.
Yeah, that actually was a question of mine. I know, there are national issues, there are statewide issues. Do you have partners who are dealing with local community issues as well?
Yeah, so first off, thank you all for still being here and chatting with us. This is pretty cool. Kind of a coffee shop online in a sense. There is a lot of partners that we're working together, because we know that there's strength in numbers. When all of us, our organizations, our neighborhoods, our communities are coming together to fight on these issues that are obviously overwhelming for all of us, right? But when all of us are fighting together, we can actually have some wins. We can actually have victory for each other, and not just keep it for ourselves. And so there's many things around the state that for our partners, like Fight for 15, for example, which is probably the modern day garbage worker in a sense. Fast food workers. Fast food workers are overwhelmed and just treated poorly. A McDonald's CEO makes 1,178 times more than their average worker. And that's just crazy. And so, Fight for 15 is a big partner. Many organizations within the Hispanic community on the South Side, Vecinos Ninos, like many partners that we have throughout Wisconsin, in Rock County, Marathon County, Madison, in various spaces, and faith communities and leaders is a lot of partners as well. And so we're seeking to mobilize everyone. We really don't want to see anyone left out. And so, how do we partner with Manitowoc? I mean, I would love to get a donation your guys' way for this homeless situation. But also, how do we come together and tackle those issues that are affecting the homeless? There was a bill that was discussed throughout the state called AB 604 that attacks the homeless for being on the streets. That will arrest homeless people and put them in prison and have the only way of getting out is paying a fee or staying in there for like 30 days. What kind of people are we if we allow ourselves to imprison homeless people and charge homeless people? Like, there are so many issues affecting our state, and so we have to come together. We have to. And so, how do we fight together? What does that look like for us to partner together? What does that look like for PPC to be in Manitowoc, or not even that? Like, how does the UU Fellowship come together and we work together on these issues? I would love to drive up to Manitowoc more and help out with this homeless issue. And how do we mobilize in that? How do we really not put Band-Aid on issues, right? How do we solve these issues? Because obviously we can solve these issues. Jim talked about corporations. A lot of corporations in this pandemic doubled their profits. Before 2019, they doubled their profits in the pandemic. And while many of us, the median income dropped by thousands of dollars over this pandemic. I mean, what does that tell us when the rich are getting extremely richer? And so there's a lot of ways that we can get involved together. Expo is another organization, a partner that addresses the prison population and assist with really trying to fight for those who were previously incarcerated, with work, with being able to vote, all these things. And so there's a lot of things that we're trying to see happen, but it will take all of us for sure.
Femi, I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Do you coordinate with any of the wisdom groups in the state?
I'm not 100% sure. Natalia, do you know?
Yes, thank you. Yes, we have been, so our moral and faith outreach is, as I don't know if you remember in the slide that it said that it was in progress. So with wisdom, through the ebbs and flows of the campaign here in Wisconsin, there are times where we've been closer with them and when we have been ready to say, here's how you can join. And there have been times where we're still kind of trying to figure out other areas of our work to be able to invite them to join. But certainly when we held the Medicaid March in Madison in 2020, they were an endorsing partner. And then Sally McCoy from Rock County, she is part of Wisdom. I can't tell you exactly which of the members of Wisdom she's part of, but she is in our coordinating committee. And as the moral and faith outreach committee gets more solid, is thinking of kind of very specific ways to involve them. Micah, I believe, is also Wisdom for more of the region that I'm at. And I know that we have certainly partnered with them. If you have a specific connection with Wisdom or a point person or a way that you, after seeing the presentation, think that we could partner with them, please let us know.
Okay, thank you. We do have a Ruth group here in Manitowoc, and it seemed like as you were talking about the issues, they are aligned, with a lot of yours. So just thank you for that.
I have one more question, and that's around I mean, our congregation is basically older retired folks. And, you know, we didn't draw any young folks to this presentation today. Could you speak for a minute about organizing the next generation of leaders? And is there anything we could do to make that happen?
I'll leave that one to Femi, who's the youth in here. I'm like halfway between you two, so.
Yeah, so another person who works with us here in Milwaukee is named Kevin. And so he has been having a lot of reach within the college university students. And so there have been testimonies from people within an organization called Rise that has given testimony even recently with the Build Back Better situation. And so there are ways of we're seeking to bring in young people through the schools and all these things. I'm actually going to personally commit to having 3 scholarships out of my own personal finances to send 3 youth in my area on the south side, one on the south side, one in my area on the north side, and another student probably on the west or east side, to fund their opportunity to get to DC. And so that's my personal commitment. And like, how do we think creatively to really put young people on the bus and provide them their finances, whatever that looks like, to be able to get to DC. And so I personally made that commitment for myself because I really want to see a lot of high schoolers and young people being a part of this campaign. And so definitely that's something that we're working on and trying to think creatively, like how do we do that specifically around Wisconsin, taking advantage of these universities, especially in Madison when the moratorium comes and things of that nature, but also in our local areas of high schools and universities and all these things. And so how do we empower that next generation is a question that we honestly have to look at, because, you know, a lot of our movements are older, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in that. Like, that's beautiful. There's wisdom, a lot of wisdom in the past experience there. And how do we share that past experience and come together to build that intergenerational type of movement is what we're seeking to work on, especially in these next few months.
That's really good. In some of your videos, I mean, it went right back 1968. I was a senior in college, and boy, I mean, my fire was lit with the civil rights movement back then, and you know, we have to light that flame with the next generation.
Mm-hmm. We're all old hippies.
Femi, if some of us would like to do what you've done, and that is to sponsor a student to go to Washington, about how much would it take? How much money to take to send an individual?
So the ticket on the bus, let me quickly find that. I believe it's like $170 something, $160 something. I apologize. My lack of preparation.
Yeah, I think that's about right, Femi, because I believe it's like $130 for the ticket itself, and then there's extra expenses. And we're collectively also looking to see how we fundraise for anybody to, you know, try to have people bring as little out-of-pocket cost as possible, and how do we creatively raise funds through different ways.
So $200 would send a child, or not a child, but a young person with you.
Yeah, but you have housing and food, so it'll be
about $500.
Yeah, at least.
Yes. So basically, how it's going to work. So it's going to be a bus that leaves the day before, and so we'll travel basically throughout the night, and we'll land in DC around 10 o'clock, and we'll gather and protest and be around with people all across the country, 43 states, 42 states. And then immediately after, we're thinking of driving straight back. And so it won't be hotel expenses, but there may be like food and snacks and other things for sure. But we don't plan on staying at the hotel or anything. We do plan on getting back in celebrating, Juneteenth on Sunday, being part of our own communities, but getting back and hitting it hard with this voting situation for sure, and mobilizing.
I just wanted to say, my name is Nancy, and I'm on the board of a statewide social action network for the Unitarian Universalists. It's called WUSON. And we're going to be having a retreat actually next week. So Kathy Bernhardt and I will be going, and we can certainly talk about this more. And it's a planning or strategy retreat. So we will mention what we've talked about here and mention the Poor People's Campaign. And also, I was glad that Kathy just asked that question about funding for people or young people to go on the bus or scholarships. I'd be happy to contribute to something like that also. So we will certainly keep you in mind at the retreat next week. And the acronym is WUUS as in Sam, SAN, I think.
Yeah.
Wisconsin Unitarian Universalist Social Action Network, right? So this is a statewide group, so all the congregations will be planning together, or most of them.
Okay. This is Jennifer. Are there on all of these gatherings, whether they're here or they're in Washington, does anyone address specific policies, solutions, sort of these kinds of things get really big really quickly. It's like, oh, we have this poverty in the country and we need, so, but are there solutions that help people break it down, that says to them, well, I have to support this or I have to support that, because change takes such a long time, and I guess I want this to be heard, versus just, oh well, that's somebody else's problem. Government should take care of this, when really government has a pretty limited role here, frankly.
Yeah. If I may, thank you. Do you say your name is Nancy, right?
Jennifer.
Jennifer, sorry. Okay, I was, because I'm doing something else at the same time, I wasn't able to see the faces. Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, I mean, I think if I may start, I think the answer is definitely. So we know that we're talking about big systemic problems that have, solutions that in part of them are policy. I heard you on one hand say, what are the policy solutions? And on the other hand, say the limited role of government. We know that as a society, the different factors, the different segments of society all play a role in what's happening, in how the society is structured, who gets to have what, and who gets to, have power, and et cetera. So as far as governmental policies that we propose, the campaign throughout its history has launched different documents that show, the roadmap for how we get there. So we have our moral agenda, and all of that can be found on our website, poorpeoplescampaign.org, and then under resources. The two kind of big ones that I would encourage people to read are the moral agenda, which has, it's like the 5 interlocking injustices are featured, and in each of them shows but actual like policies that could help us get there. So for instance, a minimum $15 across the board minimum wage, right? Permanent protection for all immigrants, that kind of stuff, but in the specific policies. And also showing the numbers, right? There's a lot of talk, like Femi was saying, about cost. And it's interesting that when it comes to certain things, we have unlimited money. We, have a huge military budget and nobody ever questions whether we have money for that. But when it comes to other things, then we have to balance it. We, with our policy work show and our statistical work show that it actually costs less money overall to our country, to the government, to taxes, to everybody, to do preventative actions, right? So that's one thing. And then the other document that I would encourage people to look at is the Third Reconstruction resolution that was introduced in the House this past year in Congress by two representatives, Barbara Lee, and I forget who else. But it's also, in a way, it's a resolution. So, it's more kind of symbolic, if you would, but it does talk about what are some of the policies that would help us, bring back the moral compass of the country.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that kind of thing. I mean, government has various tools, but they also have a bully pulpit. They set the tone. They set so much of the thinking in the country. And I've been involved in child care and early intervention, mental health policy for 40 years. And let me tell you, it's been so satisfying for me now to see the child care and Build Back Better, because I spent that entire time writing papers and policies and advocating and doing everything to get a business case and to justify free childcare. And it finally came out in the Build Back Better. Now, why did it come out? Is because people who weren't me, people who didn't care about childcare before, it became kind of a part of the general discussion. And also we introduced different solutions for it in those discussions. So now it's kind of generally accepted, even though it's not accepted by Congress, but it's accepted by anybody you talk to on the street, that early intervention, early education works. But it's taken us 40 years. So I'm always looking to reduce that time. I don't have that anymore.
Running out of time.
Well, I wanted to correct some, Jennifer, because you said, it wasn't me that eventually pushed it through. But in many ways, it was you that, your work in the past, our work together in the past, how long that's been, it all adds up, it all builds that momentum. And so we all have that worth in pushing, this stuff that really matters. And Build Back Better was and is a huge policy for us. We're very careful about surrounding or being behind certain politicians. That's not what this space is.
Right.
That's not what PPC is, but we do know the role and importance of, these representatives and senators. But at the end of the day, it's going to take the people to push all these things through.
That's right.
And so,
and it takes a long time. And thinking about ways that we can put all these issues out further than just talking to each other. We all talk to each other a lot, we need to widen the circle. Yeah,
definitely. And I love you guys' thing, by the way, that widening the circle is very powerful for sure.
Natalia shared with me the address of the Poor People's Campaign, so I will put that on our chalice if anyone would like to send a donation to support a young person going to Washington.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, any other comments? If not, again, thank you so much, both of you, for this wonderful discussion. We've really learned a lot, and I think it's motivated all of us.
Yeah, and if Jim and or Kathy, if you guys can share with us, ways to help with this homeless situation and just ways to get involved with you guys. I mean, we want to be, it's a mutual and relationship and interacting, and so we want to build that relationship for sure.
Thank you.
Maybe at some time in the future we could have you come speak in person, but have it not be necessarily a Sunday service, but invite the entire community of Manitowoc to come and visit.
That would be awesome. And definitely thank you all and the connections that you all may have. Oh, thank you, Patty, for responding. Ruth, sorry, I thought you said Ruth. And yes, you could, if you could just email us at our email, I'm on my phone, so it's harder to type, but it's Wisconsin at forpeoplescampaign.org. Wisconsin at forpeoplescampaign.org. Just like that connection with wisdom and any other kind of community connections that you all have, it would be great to plug different people into the movement, or even if you don't have a specific connection, but you know of a youth group in your community, you know of a school group, of other fellowships, of labor groups, like any potential individual or organizational connection, definitely let us know.
Hey, thank you all so much.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys. Much love to y'all. Take care.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.